So you can just, anyways. Hey, welcome to Victims and Villains. My name is Josh, aka Captain Nostalgia, and today we are jumping back into a film that we have spent much time talking about because a lot of the things that the film addresses we're very passionate about here at Victims and Villains. That is the documentary Witness Underground. It came out of our coverage from 2021's Genre Blast. We did a movie night on our Discord last year, and we're here jumping back into it today. I'm joined by writer, director, documentarian, and all around just really dope dude, Mr. Scott Homan.
Thanks a lot, Josh. Really appreciate that.
Of course,
beautiful intro.
I try every once in a while to get some that succeed well, but Witness Underground is a film that you have been working on tirelessly for the past several years. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about, if the audience is new to the concept of Witness Underground, what the film's about?
The big drive for making the movie was the concept of shunning, and it's something that has deeply affected my life through losing family. Like 17 members of my family are inside of a high control fundamentalist cult, and I haven't spoken to many of them for about 13 years. There was a couple year wavering thing where they were like, we're not sure what we're supposed to do here. Like, do you really not believe? And then they just like hard cut off. So I haven't spoken to my own siblings for more than a decade. And they want it that way. Well, I think that they're coerced to do it that way. Like, I've like softened on how I see it. I feel like they're victims. Anyways, the film deeply dives into and demonstrates that. But I didn't want to just make a film about my life, and I didn't want to make a film about that's just darkness and pain. And I also felt like growing up in that religion, that group, people saw me as different, and it didn't feel comfortable to be seen as different. But then when I got out, I was like, okay, finally, now I'm in like the normal world, and those same people or everyone I met was like, oh, you used to be in the thing that's different, so you're still different. You're not one of us. And I was like, oh, that doesn't feel good. I thought I would feel good when I got out here in the normal world. So I wanted to humanize the cult experience. So we spend the first half of the movie, almost half of the movie, like first 30 minutes, really showing how the world works on the inside of the religion through the eyes of artists, using their archival footage and music of about 30 albums that they put out. And it's all really impressive music, like that, an entire amazing music scene. And that was important to me because I have a lot to do with music growing up, and that was a way to cope with and deal with kind of the pressures of a high control religion. And then something another movie doesn't do, like the third, we demonstrate shunning and how all the losses that come from that: family, friends, community, innocence. Like the bonds that you have through blood get cut off. That's hard, and that's the big gut wrenching part of the movie. That's like really difficult to talk about and difficult to have experienced. But then like show what happens now in the present day through those same artists, because through those losses, they then have this amazing feel to then go make amazing new music about processing trauma and dealing with those kinds of losses. And it's sort of a, like, it gets better, everything's going to be okay kind of experience on the end. And it's a journey and some heavy stuff in there.
When as you're making this film and becoming closer to the subjects, closer to the people that are involved in this, specifically from the nuclear Gopher family, who is the kind of like the central figures we follow throughout the course. I guess before I jump into that, could you kind of tell us a little bit about the nuclear Gopher family, kind of how you came across them, how they got involved with the project, and what their stories are to the film?
Yeah, they're a music community. The early Web 1, like they had a website in like 1994 showing their music and they weren't really even saying that's like, this is a religious community, join our religious community for music. It was kind of like a underground thing that they were doing. I mean, it was just sort of a way to find other people in that faith, and the faith that we're talking about is Jehovah's Witnesses. And it worked because I was in like the outer reaches of the outer orbit of that city where they were, Minneapolis. I was in northern Wisconsin in the middle of nowhere, and I somehow came across this, meeting some people in that greater Jehovah's Witness multi-state community where everyone's traveling around and meeting each other. And there's like 400 musicians in total over the course of like a 17-year period that all went and recorded music and distributed their music in an open source way. So like the first album ever live streaming on the internet was Nuclear Gopher album from the founders. And yeah, it was a way to connect with people, like-minded people who are in a similar situation. And then a lot of collaborations and maybe more art came out of those relationships. And so I actually knew them while it was contemporary, when the last year of it kind of functioning, and their last music festival, I was there. And I'm living with some of those people and partying with some of those people and making art with some of those people over my few years in Minneapolis. But it was sort of like that community was like faltering and crumbling. And I was sort of being influenced by that shakiness and the books we were sharing. And it became like a bond, as I like to say, a bond stronger than faith. And we, even though people were leaving, they were still like sending information through the over the wall, if you will, that's erected in shunning. And yeah.
One of the things that I really appreciate about this film is I feel like some documentaries don't have a impactful enough emotional payoff, if that makes sense. And I think that Witness Underground, the reason that I really clicked with it at Genre Blast is because I have a religious background, not in the same faith, but I understand kind of like the same traditions, same practices. I feel like, kind of same practices. And then you also, we got a chance to do this with you last year, our Discord night.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm curious about this is kind of like throughout the course of making this film, can you kind of describe your emotional health and kind of like hearing these stories, getting closer with some of the subjects and some of the people that are in these communities?
It's a great question. And I think it's a big part of my personal journey. Like I needed to tell this story because I hadn't dealt with it. I hadn't like processed or figured out a way forward. And this was like my like reaction to being shunned was like, well, if you're going to do that, then I'm going to make a movie about it because it sucks. And that is what makes it a cult. That is what gives it this nefarious term. That's what makes it a fundamentalist or extremist group. And that's not healthy for not just them or me, but like the entirety of society. These people are knocking on your doors trying to spread these bad ideas. But that being said, like I had a few moments. I mean, I'm like trying to process my own pain and trauma through and having the separation of having this entire community of people that are supporting this film and came forward and like let me do interviews was amazing because it gave me this like objective, subjective thing where I'm not just telling my story. I'm letting them tell their story, and I'm just like picking the pieces from their interviews that resonated with my experience. So in a way, it's like an autobiography, but I'm not in it, because it's like I'm like their pain. Gotcha. I'm like, yeah, that's the right pain. But yeah, it was tricky, and like there's like to get the emotions right. Like as a former musician, I like a deep appreciation for music. I spent like 3 months just like going through their entire back catalog, and like half of the music is about, especially the stuff that came out after Nuclear Gopher dissolved and fell apart. The music that came after that was like deeply about processing trauma. And so some of the lyrics are just like super on the nose and heavy to listen to as someone who like actually lived what they were going through. And I know like the source of what they went through. So I spent like 3 months like drinking too much and crying to like their songs when I'm like, does this fit in this moment? And like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. And then like suffering and being emotional and like going back to it the next day and like facing it again, and did that for 3 months, and it like gained 10 pounds on whiskey and wine. And like, yeah, it was just a lot. Like that was just like 1 3-month period. There's a bunch of other periods where I was like, oh, this is way too heavy. Oh my God. And I would take a break from it. And it's like hard to go back to something that's like facing the internal trauma, internal pain.
Yeah, I deal with that creating content on a regular basis. I get that.
Could you give an example? Because I know we have like different goals, but they're aligned, but they're kind of different focuses.
I can't really, if I'm like looking to support somebody that's um I feel like I can't watch a whole lot of stuff now or dive into a whole lot of stuff that are like emotionally heavy because I'm dealing with a lot of stuff, whether it's films like Witness Underground or, other things that we're creating content around. It's always been really heavy to kind of like separate, like draw those lines. So like with that, like it's a great segue because my next question was like this film is two prongs. So you're not only showing where these musicians are currently and where their trajectory is going, but also where they've been. And so there's a lot of archival footage in here. And what was it like in terms of like what made the film, like what was it about like certain scenes or certain songs that like are actually featured in this film?
Um, so a lot of us, after leaving this faith, this faith, you spend a lot of your life growing up pointing fingers at other religions.
Mhm.
Just to give one example of a song, "A Prayer to No One" that Cindy Elvendahl wrote, sings, and she says is like her favorite song to sing in the film. And it's sort of like a song that we feature after she and the others in the movie sort of get out of this abusive situation. She sings "A Prayer to No One," and a lot of the people, after living your whole life saying like, oh, the Pentecostals are wrong because speaking in tongues is the act of demons, and the Catholics are wrong because whatever list of things, and this religion's wrong and they're worshiping a false god, and this holiday isn't correct, and like they're doing it wrong, and it's like a pagan origin, and you have that negative framework to show why your own worldview is the best and why everyone else is terrible. It's like you're pushing everything else down.
Sure.
So if you do that your whole life, everyone else is worshiping a false god, and there are many, many false gods. And when you finally realize that you've been lied to, manipulated, and you're being abused actively, and coerced with undue influence, and we started learning these terms, later. But when you realize what those things are, a lot of people in the film just realize like, oh, I don't believe in your God or any of the other gods of the past or any of the other gods of all the other religions. Now I'm putting that critical lens on this religion who's actively abusing and actively doing these terrible things to me, and realizing that the whole thing is a sham and a lie, and that God that this religion talks about also isn't real. And so atheism became like an important clean slate for people to get out and be like, oh, the supernatural thing isn't real. So that song in particular would be like one that's like an anthem of the realization moment of like, oh, that God isn't real. Who have I been talking to? And what do they represent? If this is the faith that represents that God, then like, and that's supposed to be the true God, then okay, I'm done. Like that's evil that I've been experiencing. And so that's like a heavy one for people that might be like in a faith group still or have their belief in. And as atheists, like most people often think like atheists are like are trying to attack religion. These atheists are just like, I don't want anything to do with religion. I don't want to talk about it or think about it anymore. It's a different kind. And so that's like a minor theme in the movie. Just that one just came to mind because we kind of highlighted it. There's another one that's like we had to recut the film because one of the artists died, unfortunately, before we got a contract. So we wrote another song. Orion Sutter wrote another song, and that one makes me tear up every time I hear it. But it's like, I will never leave you. I would never leave you is like one of the lyrics that we like prominently put out. And it's like, man, everyone that's in this faith has cut us out. And he's saying like, I would never do that to you, but in like a really soft and loving way. Like if people leave, this community is like, hey, clean slate, you're welcomed back. We'll help you have a soft landing on the outside. Hang out with us. Like we're an open community of love and support. We'll do what we can. And so like the I will never leave you lyric is like heavy.
Yeah, one of the things that I feel like sometimes as a viewer or as a reviewer of documents, It's early. As a viewer and critic of documentaries, one of the things that sometimes is the ending could feel either really satisfactory, or you're like, man, like I want to see where this story continues. And one of the
Mhm.
things that I appreciate about your passion over these subjects and is that after the Witness Underground is kind of halted, you have also kind of continued the story, continued the conversation through podcasting, interviews, social media. Can you kind of talk about that transition from having a self-contained story into content creation, but still keeping that same narrative?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's something that kind of was born out of the film festival run where we met each other. I was like, how do you promote a movie on a film festival run? I have no idea. Like, get on shows, I want to make a show. And you were actually one of the first people I met who was like, hey, I want to talk to you about your thing. I was like, oh, like this is what's supposed to happen at film festivals. Awesome. Yeah, hell yeah,
Nice.
I'll do an interview. Thank you. So I really appreciate that connection. And you kind of showed me like, oh, there's like people that are out there trying to like help artists get the word out, because film festivals are a little bit, I mean, I loved genre blast, but some of them are a little bit parasitic in that they're like, we won't pay you anything, fly here, give us your art for free because we're helping you, and then they take the ticket sales and it's like, bye. Like, wait, what did I get out of that? Like,
Sure.
connect me with a film distribution person or like a media person or a marketing person. You're like filling that role naturally. um, but yeah, I started interviewing the people in the movie, because in the movie we only get like, even though we had like a 2 hour, 3 hour interview, we cut down to like 10, 15 minutes per person out of 5 people. And it's already a lot of people to have in an interview. And I was like, well, I want to put out the raw interviews, and we'll do that eventually. We're going to do that. That's in the film extras we have a Kickstarter right now, film extras.
Mm.
We'll get to that. But I wanted to, these stories are nuanced. This is like a long format type storytelling thing. Like, this is someone's whole life. And I loved it. And what I realized is like making a movie takes a lot longer than I thought, and years. And it's usually like 3 to 5 years to get a movie
Yeah.
done, especially a documentary, because there's a ton more editing, like 10x more editing, because you don't know what your story is. When you make a narrative, you know exactly what you're shooting, and you know exactly how to cut it, and you know what, you actually mark what scene is good. So like the editing's like, the shooting's what takes long. And the shootings like for this is like 10 days. But making the podcast was like a natural thing that came out of it. I was like, oh, in hour, I could do live like this, what we're doing right now, and have more depth and more nuanced story out into the world, affecting change in the world. And that was valuable to me. And I'm going to do probably more lives because it's so efficient for that. But even if you edit it and make it super nice and polish it, it's like 1 to 3 weeks of time total to have an amazing story that's worth telling out into the world. So I love that. And I've been finding like, this is a group of musicians that were in a religion, and we really, really hide that. And we never really talk negatively about the religion or the people in the religion. The religion, of course, had some negativity to it. And we demonstrate that. But the people we honor, because we humanize them. And it's important that they are not having a finger pointed at them. They are the real victims here, as being coerced, trapped people.
Sure.
That have to do this thing. But then I wanted to highlight more stories, and there's a music scene inside, there's a music scene outside of people who've then processed and used that music. Well, I found more stories like that. The more I talk about this film, the more artists come out of the woodwork, and they're like, hey, I also made an album. Check out this sick metal album that my band did. And now I'm working on this other project. And there's this other band in Australia, and there's this other band in Europe. You got to check them out. And just like constantly I'm getting hit up with artists who've left this particular group. Like every time I do an episode, it's like one more person comes out of the woodwork.
That's awesome.
And yeah, and it's not just this religion, right? There's so many religions like this, and it's not even just religion. There's so many groups that like you can use art to kind of discuss the transition you're making, whether that's a really difficult transition or like a smoother one. There's people are making art about this kind of thing. It's not like a universal human experience in it. Yeah. So I love doing the Witness Underground podcast, and it's like, it is a natural extension of the film.
Well, you mentioned the Kickstarter, and you guys are currently You guys are currently in the midst of it. You guys are winding down on it. You tell us a little bit about the Kickstarter, kind of some of the perks, the what you guys are hoping to raise the money for. I believe it's you guys are trying to get the film onto like bigger platforms like Amazon, Tubi, etc.
That's exactly it. Yeah, so the money is being raised for that, and finishing funds for distribution refers to things like quality control, which can be like $3,000 to $7,000 to make sure the film is packaged in the right way that it can get distributed. And then PR, like what I've realized is like, yeah, I have the podcast. Yes, people know about it. If you've seen this, then you know about it. But everyone that you're friends with probably don't know about it. Like we need like 1 million people to see the movie for it to be a successful movie. In terms of like actually being able to make a second movie with the money made from this one, kind of thing. So with our grassroots DIY community-based outreach that we're doing and media like this, we still need to probably leverage a PR firm to reach that greater audience that can that will get us distributed, because those streaming platforms also want to have an audience, like a big audience, to make it worthwhile to put you on their platform. So there's a lot of pieces to that. So there's a lot of costs to distribution, and ultimately it's marketing. And then there's some like technical stuff that comes before that. So we're raising $20,000 is the goal. We are at 68% as of today, and we have a few more days to go. It ends on Friday, November 17th. And of course, like we need your support to make it happen. Like it's an all or nothing deal. And ultimately, it's a great story and it's worth telling, and it will affect and change your life. The social impact documentary telling you something that's never really been shown in a film before. Those 3 chapters, humanizing the cult experience, demonstrating shunning, and then it gets better, showing rock people like on their rise through music. And it's something I'm super passionate about. And ultimately, I want you to like support it because you love great storytelling, and you don't have to be from a dangerous cult group or a musician to appreciate great storytelling. Like I'll watch a movie about a Beatle in another country and get excited about it, and I don't have a deep passion about Beatles, for example. I'm a big fan of documentaries, but yeah, things you can get all the music ever released by Nuclear Gopher, by the people who are in the movie, because we can't exactly promote or give away music by people who are still in their religion. So there's like we're almost like our films are telling half the story, even though we wanted to tell the whole story. We really tried to do that. There's 12 albums by the Nuclear Gopher artists, and there's amazing music there. And then there's 16 albums by those same people who then made amazing music on the outside. And then there's the Witness Underground music from the people I've interviewed who've Bloody Tuesdays and Wesley David are the big ones that we included. And I love those guys. And then there's 9 ebooks from other ex-witnesses from around the world, in UK, Australia, the States, the Apostasy trilogy, Apocalypse, which is a funny graphic novel, and I Am God, a channeled like spiritual ideology from Daniel Torridon, Rising from the Ashes of the Jehovah's Witnesses by Denise Wise out of England. And then the 3 books that are in the movie, James Zimmerman's Deliverance at Hand, Redemption of about Jehovah's Witnesses, about Jehovah's Witness. And then the 2 books that Ryan Sutter himself, who's like the main arc of the story, he wrote My Bible Volume 1, is like a collection of like what he thought were like important works of his time, which include things from like Wired Magazine and the Jefferson Bible, which is like the Gospels that have nothing supernatural in them from the president. And yeah. Oh, and Hira, his blog collection that he did as he was processing his exit, which influenced me ultimately. And one of the big reasons I ended up leaving that group is because people in that music community from Nuclear Gopher were reading his blog and then like influencing ideology and ideas between me and that person. Like I got like a second generation wave of the Hira blog that Ryan Sutter wrote 18 years ago. And that influenced me to like think differently and eventually like think for myself in a way that was more critical.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how like this is this entire Kickstarter is kind of like a just demonstration of this entire experience for you. It feels like a really immersive to include like both the books and the music alongside with the film, because you're not just jumping into like one particular art or type of artistry, you're jumping into kind of the real mental health of art and how art can be a multitude of different processes for all of us, whether that's music, film, conversations like this, or art, or graphic novels, and that's really, really, really dope.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really interesting point, and I almost don't even think I realized what it was we were making, in terms of using art as a process to process trauma,
Mm.
until I was like deep in it and the film was done. I was like, oh, this feels good. It feels really, really good to actually do the making of the thing and just to highlight the art of others in a way that supports my visual and storytelling art, um, and to like include the books that those people wrote in the film. And it's like hard to put a book in a movie, but like we included 3 books in a movie, in a way that was influential, um, and even highlighted actually another book, a witness propaganda book, and for how it has been manipulative. So there's 4 books in a movie, but it's like small pieces, of course. But yeah, no, it's using art to process trauma is kind of like how we're selling the movie, because that's what we kind of realized that's what it is, and that's what
Yeah,
why we all got behind it, and why like all that art I mentioned that's in the Kickstarter is donated by those artists in support of the release of this movie, because they support the release of this movie.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it feels really good to have that kind of like machine behind it. Like everyone's like, yeah, let's get this out there. This is an important movie.
Well, so you mentioned that the Kickstarter ends Friday. We have a link for you guys in the description below. How regularly are you to go back to the podcast and some of the current content creation? How regularly are you publishing content or streaming content? Where can people find it?
Yeah, but YouTube channel, and I distribute the podcast everywhere, but we use Buzzsprout. So there's a website for the film there, or for the podcast there. But yeah, it's every month I have one like deep dive interview where I actually take the music from the artist and cut it with their interview, so in a way that really highlights their music and their
That's awesome.
transformation process. And then during this campaign, we're doing something special, which I'm calling the Kickstarter special, because we did we did 4 interviews in a week, that were just lives with no. We don't have the music there. We have a really nice story, but we're also like, pitching the film to pitching the Kickstarter to the audience in those. So it's not exactly like a proper podcast, but we have a lot of extra stories that are coming out this month just in support of this process. And artists from all over the world are like coming back to these lives with us like this month. But yeah, once a month.
Awesome. That's awesome. Make sure that you guys support Witness Underground. Again, the link is in the description below. Scott, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for making films like Witness Underground and continuing the conversation of art's benefit to mental health and kind of overcoming trauma.
I really appreciate that you had us on, Josh. Captain Nostalgia. Big fan.
Yeah. Well, until next time, hit that subscribe button, hit the donate button, and stay classy. Have a good Sunday, guys.
Take care.